Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to Getting to Know You. My name is Joe Nash. Today we're going to be talking to Wendy Burch, the Executive Director of the Tenbrook Mansion, and Donald Hyman, an area educator, singer, playwright, and historical reenactor. They're going to be telling us about an event down at the Tenbrook Mansion on Sunday, February 19th, from 3 to 5 p.m., which is free. Don is going to give a lecture, African Americans in New Amsterdam, the land of the blacks. And also that day, in conjunction with the talk, there's going to be a liturgical dancer, Lucille Spencer, and the gospel quartet called One Accord. So welcome, Don, Wendy. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
So before we get to Don and the event, Wendy, why don't you tell us about the Tenbrook Mansion and some February, why you're having this event and the occasion for this?
Sure. Well, our mission is to preserve, promote, and present the area's history and culture. Mm-hmm. And Donald and I met a few months ago, and we had talked about doing a program, and he proposed this particular program, which we're really excited about presenting, especially with it being Black History Month. So he basically put this whole program together, the lecture, and some other things I know he'll talk about in a minute. So we're very excited about that.
Okay. So Don, you're, besides all the things I just mentioned, you're a historical reenactor also? Is that what you were saying before?
Yeah, every now and then I get on stage and I'm somebody else. You know, we've done quite a few characters from history, and I've been blessed to do that because I get people like Frederick Douglass, mm-hmm. Buck Leonard from the Negro Leagues. Oh. I had a one-man show that I wrote a play called Safe. And I did it in Schenectady for the kids at the Hamilton Hill Arts Center. And they found out about it in North Carolina somewhere in the town where he comes from. And so that newspaper down there did a whole big article on me, and I was so excited, about that, that, the whole idea with the Negro Leagues and what's happening with that.
Oh, okay. So, well, on the 19th, February 19th, Sunday, down at Tenbrook, your talk is entitled African Americans in New Amsterdam, which was New York City in the colonial days, mm-hmm. the land of the blacks. What is this area? What is this all about?
Oh, it's something I'm very passionate about these days and very excited about, because even as of today, if you talk about New York City history, and especially colonial New York City history, most people don't really associate it with African Americans. And when I went to school in Brooklyn, yay, I'm from Brooklyn, the things that still stick in my head about early New York City history are the Dutch and, mm-hmm. and Peter Minuet and, $24 for Manhattan and Peter Stuyvesant, And for somehow, if you look at today's textbooks, it basically will still cover that area. But fortunately for me, I had a mind-blowing experience, as they would say. I was in graduate school at Long Island University in Brooklyn, and my major was urban studies. And for my class, I was doing a paper on Brooklyn Heights, and I chose Brooklyn Heights because I worked for the federal court system for like 12 years, and I figured, well, I can walk from there to my job. And I became a member of the Brooklyn Historical Society, which was around the corner in Brooklyn Heights. And they had all these books that I could use on my lunch hour to do my work, And my professor recommended a book, I believe, called Colonial New York at the time, and I was going to use it to get information on Brooklyn Heights. And in reading it, I discovered that what was known as New Amsterdam, which is like the Wall Street area mm-hmm. today, was basically the city at that time. And there were quite a number of African Americans who were there, and they came at first in bondage, but they had a different type of status. They could testify in court. They learned to speak Dutch. They would go to church. So they were integrated into the community. But what really fascinated me the most was the fact that at one point in 1644, we were talking about it. They petitioned the Dutch West India Company to give them their freedom. And they do receive their freedom. And what's more fascinating is they get land grants. And everybody goes, okay, so they got land grants, they're going to farm. Oh, no, this wasn't any land grant. Today, if you go to Manhattan and you go to places like Little Italy, Chinatown, Greenwich Village, where the Empire State Building is, Pennsylvania Station, Chelsea, Madison Square Garden, that whole 2-mile stretch was owned by these farmers, by these 11 farmers and others who would get land grants. And somehow it's not mentioned in the textbooks or history books, and most people don't associate it with the history of New York City or the history of New York. And they developed that land, they farmed it. They were required to give an annual tax. They belonged to the Dutch Reformed Church. So we have a lot of records that show their children being baptized.
Well,
Because
I think you were saying they spoke Dutch also? And
they spoke
dressed
Dutch.
Okay.
And they dressed the Dutch, and they followed customs like the Pinkster Festival and so on and so forth. But one of the things that happened with this half-freedom situation that they had was that their children would still be in bondage to the Dutch West India Company. And one of the ways they tried to get around it was to baptize their children in the Dutch Reformed Church. I found a document that said that they named the twins Adam and Eva. I thought that was just so cute. But they wanted to do that because they felt that by having them Christianized and becoming a member of the church, that they could keep their freedom. But it was a little difficult at times to do that. But the areas that they had, and they had their farms, in the presentation on the 19th, I have some of the deeds, the original deeds. There is a film clip that I'll show that one of the descendants still lives in Manhattan at that time. And what we mostly know is one of my favorite spots to hang out as a teenager when I lived in New York City was Washington Square Park, and NYU and that whole Greenwich Village scene. And this gentleman, Manuel de Groot, who's this gentleman's ancestor, owned that whole area. So for whatever it's worth, most people don't associate African Americans in Manhattan with that area, which is like what they said would be like 110 blocks of New York City area. But the first thing that would come out if you would say, here's $100, where do black people live in Manhattan? They'd say Harlem. And I would have said the same thing too had I not read this information. But it's all there. It's all there.
And you have some of the primary
documents
deeds and you'll be showing us.
Yes, definitely. Okay. I have a map that shows the actual areas. Like, let's say Simon Congo had Union Square, Paul Angola had this part. And it's just so interesting, so fascinating to me.
So what have you uncovered in your research? Who are these 11? Can you tell us a little about these 11? How they got here, how long they were slaves before all?
Well, they came through. What happened was they had names that sort of suggested the areas of West Africa they came from, like Simon Congo, or Mr. Angola. There's someone who's Anthony Portuguese, which suggests which European countries might have captured them. But one gentleman here is interesting. His name is Peter Santomé, right? And Peter's son, he manages to get educated and he becomes the first black doctor in the New York City area. And he gets a large area of land in the Greenwich Village area, as well as the area in Brooklyn we now call what? Williamsburg.
Okay.
So that was kind of interesting to me. But I found one of the documents that they sent the petition in to William Keith, who was the director of the Dutch West India Company, and get petitioning, and he responded to them as follows. May I?
Oh, sure.
We, William Keith, and Council of New Netherland, having considered the petition of the Negroes named Paulo Angola, Big Manuel, Little Manuel, Manuel de Garrett de Groot, I guess Manuel was a popular name, Simon Congo, Anthony Portuguese, Gracia, Peter Santomé, John Francisco, Little Anthony, and John Fort Orange, who have served the company 18 or 19 years to be liberated from their servitude. Also that they are burdened with many children, so that it's impossible for them to support their wives and children as they have been accustomed to if they must continue in the company's service. Do release for the term of their natural lives the above names and their wives from slavery.
Okay. And
So they began to get their own land, the tracts, and they have landed deeds. They have the deeds to their land.
And this area was called, was it the Land of the Blacks?
Yes, that
Okay.
that area from Canal Street to 34th Street today.
Okay.
If you look, what I usually do in the presentations is I give people a copy of the New York City map so
Okay.
they can see the landmarks that are located in that
Okay.
area.
Oh, very good. Now, in your research, was slavery in the colonial New York, what we know as New York City, was it different than slavery in the South? Or I mean, I know slavery.
It had a different type of connotation because you don't have these large plantations like you'd have in the South.
Yeah.
But remember, we're still dealing with a time in the world where most people are still agricultural. So yes, that was done. The farming was done. But in addition, for example, some of the characters that I got to reenact, for example, at Cherry Hill Mansion, I did a reenactment where I played a Cooper's apprentice.
Oh, okay.
And in doing so, what you find out is most of these people were given a trade because what use were you just to be sitting around and looking pretty in Dutch cobbler shoes or broad clothes, you know? So you find out they're carpenters and they're coopers and they're horse carriagemen and they're cooks. They all have trades. They all have trades. So you'll find that you'll have a lot more of that in the North than you would in the South, where the need would be just to work on a plantation. And then, but you do have people there that are blacksmiths and nurses and that type of thing, because remember, it's a self-contained community. Okay? But here you'll find in the North, or like New York City, that they'll have skills and trades. But also farming will be included.
Okay, now the Dutch offered these men their freedom, I guess you could say.
Half freedom.
Or half freedom was called. And this obviously I don't think happened in the South. Did the Dutch have a different attitude towards slavery, or?
I usually, with my students in school, the way I teach them about the New World, I teach them that it's about ESPN. And I say, what's ESPN? And they go, oh, that's a sports channel on cable. I go, no, England, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, and France. And then they put it on the top of their test, and they always remember they get that right. Everything else they get wrong, but they get that right. So no, I'm just kidding. But the idea with these companies, like the Dutch West India Company, it was not to really settle in the beginning, but as a fur trading place. That was the idea of New Netherlands and Amsterdam. And that's what they did. They really hadn't built it up as a village community. When it started to get built up and settled is when they began to bring these Africans in to do the building. Like, for example, we mentioned that some of the things they did was they cleared land, they planted and harvested crops, they built houses, roads, bridges, they built Fort Amsterdam, they cut the road that became Broadway, and they fortified a wall along a path known as Wall Street.
Okay.
Because that basically was where New Amsterdam really ended in those days under the Dutch.
Well, I think I was trying to do a little research before I talked to you, and I read something that the Dutch India Company, the Dutch West India Company, you're right, New York wasn't supposed to be a permanent settlement, and then they had to bring these people in who slaves. They actually built up. They mentioned the forts and all this, so these 11 men, or not just the 11, but
they increased.
The slaves,
yes.
increased. They actually built the beginnings of what we now know as New York City.
Yes, they do. They do.
Okay.
But we don't seem to associate that with the history of New York City. And if you get the books, it's really there. I'm not like imagining this, but as a reenactor, like my mind is like drifting. You know, I'm imagining doing something about these communities, because another thing that fascinates me with the primary documents, Bogardus was the domine, the Dutch Reformed minister, who would baptize them and wanted to teach them and so forth. And there's a marvelous story that goes with this, because he had actually been in Guinea as a comforter to the sick, and he had this compassion for Africans. And when he got this position in New Amsterdam, this post, he worked with them, and he felt that that they should be integrated in the community, especially by becoming Christian. And for some reason, he had to go back to Holland on the same ship that William Kef, the director, who wasn't in good standing because he was doing a lot of things and they got into this Indian war and stuff. But on the ship that they went back together on, it sank at sea. So there's for me as a director and producer and theater thing, there's a lot going on there. You know, where I could see having him as come in and work with these guys, these 11 people in the community, baptizing little Adam and Eva, you know, and it would entertain people but educate them at the same time.
Well, last year at our library we had an historical reenactor from Plymouth Plantation here, and it does kind of bring history more alive than just sort of reading a book. How did you get the idea for being an historical reenactor?
You know, well, you know what? I told you that I was a sweat, and he was laughing at me. I said a sweat. He said, "You don't look like you're sweating to me." I said, "Yes, I am a sweat." I said, "I used to be a SWAT, but then I became an elder, so I'm a singer, writer, elder, actor, and teacher."
Okay.
And so what happened was there was the African American Family Day at the Empire Plaza, and I went down to audition. And at that time, I thought I could sing like Marvin Gaye. You know, I wanted to be in that show so bad. So the lady says to me, "Can you do characters?" So I said, "Characters?" And I live in thrift shops. I told you that. I love thrift shops and garage sales. This is what I love most about upstate New York. They have them everywhere, and there goes my paycheck. But I wanted to be in that show so bad, I would have stood on my head. So she said yes. And interestingly enough, my whole fate was changed in my direction of my life because I had found a book at a thrift shop about Frederick Douglass, the narrative of a slave. And I said, let me take this, because in my class, I was teaching history at Albany High School. I said, at some point, I could use some of his words as the primary document when we get to that part of history. And I just put it on the side. And I said, okay, I'll do it. But I'll do Frederick Douglass and I'll do a speech by him. So I went home and found something. Yeah, I'll do that, right? And the next thing I know, I did it. I found some of my thrift shop clothing, a shirt that looked like a vest. I wanted to look the part, and I refused to get the phony wig and beard because I've seen people do that, and it sort of takes away from what it is he's trying to say. And I did it at the plaza. Next thing I know, I was in Troy Record. I was in this paper, on as a TV, this thing and that thing, and people started to request that I be Frederick Douglass. Let me add to that. My good friends over at the Schuyler Mansion, Michelle Mavigliano, I love her. She was wonderful. They asked me to come in because they were doing something, and they wanted me to be one of Schuyler's servants' class. Now, mind you, the African American Festival is Saturday, so I got this Frederick Douglass beard on. During that time period, they don't wear beards, so the next day I got to be Klaus and you know the knee pants and the shoes and the George Washington hat, and I can't have a beard. And then that week I'm going to be we're going to be rehearsing at Schenectady Light Opera Company for a play that I was in. Mm-hmm. So I looked up at God as I'm standing there holding this musket, and I said, if you really want me to do this, this is what it's like, you know. So, you know, I embraced it, but the beautiful thing about it was my good friend Cliff Oliver, who's also involved with me with these reenactments. We just recently did a 12th night at Schuyler Mansion, and we feel that like doing that is like we're representing African Americans at that time and showing people that we were here and a part of the history at that time. He asked me, he heard about Frederick Douglass. He said, well, I'm doing like a photographic spread about African Americans upstate New York. Could you do Frederick Douglass? So I said, yeah. He came and picked me up early one morning, and we drove up to Washington County, which, you know, my living in this area, I haven't gotten too far, maybe Saratoga. So we drove up there, and I'm looking how quaint these villages are and stuff like that. And he drives me to this church in Lakeside that Frederick Douglass had spoke in 1851. And it was the most eerie feeling because we were walking around the church, and he'd say, let's do a shot here, let's do a shot there, right? And then all of a sudden, I'm at this desk where they, you know, have the books where Douglass signed in 1851, and I like get this feeling that I want to take a photo, you know. And I said, Cliff, can you take this photo real quick? And I did a profile and turned to the side. Out of the hundreds of pictures that he gave me from that portfolio, by the way, that's a traveling exhibit around the nation now. I gave a copy of it to my house principal at the time at Albany High School. She put it up. Everybody else wanted a copy of it. The next thing I know, every time I send pictures out for press releases, I'll send them 4 or 5 of them. everybody, including Wendy, picks that one there, you know, and I don't, it works. It really works for me.
Okay.
So I've done that reenactment. I've done Schuyler Mansion on a regular basis. I always love that. No matter how cold it is, we have the best time, you know, and it's always 12th night in General Schuyler, and they're wassailers and, you know, the costumes and everything. I really get into it.
When you're doing that, now on the 19th at the Ten Broeck, you're just giving a lecture on the history of what we've been talking about. But when you're doing reenacting, what is it do you want people to take away from that, as opposed to just talking about Frederick Douglass? And you're sort of, when you're reenacting, what?
Well, for example, you brought a good question to bear. Excuse me. There's a way to teach history that doesn't have to be put to sleep. Okay, we have a lot more interactive ways, and a lot of time when I was teaching history, and the actor would come out at me, and I would like see what they were saying, and I would say, rather than be boring and tell my kids, you know, about Frederick Douglass. Suppose I acted out Frederick Douglass. Gone, sold and gone to the rice swaps way down in the South. You know, and they would start laughing or whatever, and then come. Well, and I realized that the media, for the most part, gives entertainment to people that they buy. It's a business, right? But why can't we teach people at the same time? So I find a way of teaching people about a lot of Black history. We did Billie Holiday play at the New York State Museum. That was well received. We're going to be doing a play about Zora Neale Hurston on the 18th at College of St. Rose.
And you've done Freedom Summer?
We did Freedom Summer last year about Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman at the College of St. Rose. And so my thing is, like, there's so much in history that could be put on stage that I'm working on. And I'm definitely looking at this Dutch thing right now in the land of the Blacks to bring that as a theater piece in the near future, because, you know, I don't run out of ideas. I just get inspired, you know.
Well, you sound like you have a lot of ideas. I thought when you said you were sweaty because you work so much, you were just sweaty.
I get no. The ideas come to me, and I really enjoy myself.
Okay, now on the 19th down at the Ten Broeck, besides Don, your lecture, much of Wendy, you're having, there's two other things going on. This goes on from 3 to 5. So what else besides Don's lecture are you having?
Well, Don has arranged to have a gospel quartet there.
Okay.
One Accord.
One Accord, yes. They're a cappella group from Capital Region Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Okay.
Okay, they're very good.
And also a liturgical dancer.
Sister Lucille Spencer, she is the best in the world. I love her. She's going to be in our Zora Neale Hurston play. She plays Zora when I was a little girl, and she does a dance to A Precious Lord, but she is quite dynamic.
No, she will be dancing with the gospel group, or is it separate?
She dances separately, but she interprets the songs to the music, and it has more of a spiritual base to it.
Okay. Well,
she calls it, she ministers through dance.
Okay.
So we'll have this wonderful program going on. There'll be light refreshments, and people will also have the opportunity to explore the Ten Broeck Mansion as well.
It is, I should say, the most important thing, it is free, correct?
It is, yep, no cost. Mm-hmm.
And then one other, we might as well talk about this because this show will be on all during February. You have an event, I got the paper here, at the end of February, February 24th, 5th, and 6th. Why don't you talk about this?
Sure.
This event?
It's called the Amazing Amaryllis, the CD Gardeners of Albany. This is the third year they've done this, and they've done it other places. This is the first time they're doing it at the Ten Broeck Mansion. It'll consist of, on the 24th, an art show where artists will be in painting and drawing scenes of the mansion, and there'll be artwork of amaryllis and beautiful amaryllis, potted amaryllis flowers that people can come in and bid on and see what the artists are doing. The following day, people can come for a tea. That's $20 for non-members and $15 for members of ACHA. And again, they'll have an opportunity to bid on the artwork and the flowers.
They're going to be doing the artwork on that Friday?
That's correct, yep. And then on the Sunday, there's a lecture on the amaryllis called the Amazing Amaryllis, and that'll be the last opportunity, and that'll be free. That'll be the last opportunity for people to bid on the flowers and the artwork. And of course, this is it's an education on the amaryllis, but it's also a little fundraiser for the organization so that we can continue to bring excellent programming.
Okay, so and the Ten Broeck Mansion is on 9 Ten Broeck Place down in Albany. The website, I always say the website is not, if you just go to Google and type in Ten Broeck Mansion, it'll come up, right?
Yes, so yep, tenbroeckmansion.org.
Okay, so the 19th, And Don, I think you gave a good sense of your enthusiasm for history. I think you may get some little reenacting in during your talk here on your on the African Americans in New Amsterdam, the land of the blacks. That's Sunday, February 19th, 10 Broeck Mansion, 3 to 5, and it's free. Also with liturgical dancer Lucille Spencer, and the Gospel Quartet One Accord. So Wendy, Don, thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we'll see you next time on Getting to Know You.